I am Mayor John Hala, and it's my privilege to serve the Ames community in that capacity. And this is the first in a series of community conversations. We were very intentional in using the term conversation because this is not a lecture. This is not something that we're pontificating on, but we want to start and continue the conversation around mental health that is an issue here in the community. I'd like to first of all just thank the Ames City Council. They have funded once again these conversations, provided resources, and they're very committed to it. And actually, it's one of our values. It's promoting physical and mental health in the Ames community. So tonight, what we're going to do is you probably all have an agenda here, and in order to keep things moving quickly, once I invite Sarah to come up and start us off, then under the facts, hopes, and resources, the speakers will come up, do a quick introduction of themselves, and make their presentations. Then I'll come back up again and introduce the next steps. And then the same thing, we'll have people, we'll just kind of go through. And then we're going to have a question and answer session at the end. And so we're going to have some staff are going to pass around these green cards. And if you need a pen or a pencil, let us know and they can get one to you. And if you, as the speakers are going through, write your questions down, and then midway through, we'll collect them. And then at the end, we'll also collect them. Deb Schildroth is going to go ahead and curate those and then give them to me, and then we'll pose them so we can go ahead and keep the evening going. So what precipitated this series? We're going to have 6 different community conversations, and I'll just draw your attention to the back of the agenda. They're already set. The topics are set. The dates are set. They're all going to be held here in the library auditorium, except for the next month. We have to go to the water treatment plant. There's a very nice conference room out there. This room has already been committed for that evening. And then the last one, we're going to go ahead and need to verify the location. But we try to keep them on a specific night, but we're just having some challenges to keep them going. But I know we'll have one in November, then we're going to skip in December, and then we'll wait till end of January, primarily because you'll make sure Iowa State students can come if they want to be a part and parcel of this. So just by way of a few introductory comments, since taking office 5 years ago, it's become extremely apparent to me that there is a growing mental health crisis, not only in our community, not only in Story County, not only in our state, but also in our nation. And it pains me to say that this morning there was a funeral for an 18-year-old in Huxley who took his own life. And there's been suicides at Gilbert, in Ames, in Roland Story, in Huxley, and there's probably other ones as well too. And when I go to conventions and I talk to mayors and they say, so what's the most pressing issue in the community? The first thing I say is mental health. We can talk about economic development. We can talk about different projects. Those are important. We talk about quality of life. And what's really important, mental health is a big, big issue, and we've got to talk about it. And unfortunately, there still is a stigma that we don't want to talk about mental health, and we sure don't want to talk about suicide. Some may not be aware of it. I get that. Some might want to deny it. Some just don't want to even talk about it. It's got a stigma attached to it. So the objective is, let's get the conversation going out in the open. And I hope that this stimulates each of you talking to others in your circles. And we're going to talk about at the end, what can you do? This is not just more or less us telling you facts. That's why it says facts, hope, resources, but also what can you do? We want some practical takeaways moving forward. We don't have all the solutions, but we need to start talking about the topic, the issues, and working together. So tonight you're going to hear some personal stories, some facts, resources, some creative initiatives from some young people. and it's coming from a broad cross section. And this issue transcends age. It's at the K-12, it's at the Iowa State University, it's in our community at large. So this is not meant to be an all-inclusive cross section. You're going to see we have 11 different groups tonight. We're going to try and keep them going fairly rapid fire. But this is just going to give you a snapshot across our entire community. And we hope to have even more coming to our next meeting as well, too. And I can see, Jeff, I keep on pushing the page down button, and I've already got Sarah's slide up. So without further ado, I trust you'll find this to be very informative and beneficial. And so I'm going to invite Sarah Shingren to come up, and she's going to go ahead and share her story.
I want all of us to start by closing our eyes. If that feels safe. If that doesn't feel safe, just look down. That's okay. And I want you to take one of your hands. It doesn't matter which one. And I want you to put it on your belly. Just feel it there. And then on your own, I want you to take 5 really big, deep breaths, pushing that hand out as far as you can, making a nice, big, long exhale. Just feel how that feels inside of you. When you're done, if you want, you can open your eyes. But if you leave them closed, it'll make it a lot easier for me the rest of this. Okay, good. Now I want everyone to take your hands. I want you to start tapping your collarbones. Okay, this is a technique that I learned in a mindfulness class. And I'm going to be honest, when I first learned it, I was like, this is the most ridiculous thing. I don't think I would ever use it. And then I find myself in my car driving home thinking about how I'm going to possibly make a speech to a bunch of strangers about something that is very near and dear to my heart. And I'm just going like this. And it works because you start going like this and you realize, hey, something's going on. I got to calm down a little bit. So we've done the belly and we've done the collarbone. One more. This is really easy. You can do. Just kind of hold yourself right here. Feel your heartbeat if you want. If it's racing, switch hands, move to the other side. These are just a couple little mindfulness techniques that you can use. We're going to be talking about some really deep, heavy things tonight. It can kind of make us feel really uncomfortable inside at times, and that's okay. One thing I've learned this past year is that just because we don't feel safe, that doesn't mean that we aren't safe. We have to kind of navigate through that. So these techniques are something you can use tonight if you feel comfortable to. If you don't, if stuff arises and you need to leave this room, just give us a thumbs up as you leave. So that way, you know, we know that we don't have to follow you. If you would like us to follow you, that's okay. We'll come and sit and talk with you as you work through whatever it is that came up. And that's perfectly fine. This is a safe place, but also you have to take care of your own insides too. And if none of those techniques work, I encourage you to go online and learn a couple of your own. So before we get into Vincent's story, I want to give a couple trigger warnings. Tonight, we're going to be talking about suicide. I will also be talking about self-harm, talking about body dysmorphia. Again, uncomfortable topics. If you need to leave, it's okay. We encourage you to stay if it feels safe. I also want to warn you, this is the first time I have publicly shared this story, and I cry a lot. So thank you for being patient as I walk through this for the first time. There are definitely moments I'm going to have to stop and honor the things that come up inside of me as I share this. So thank you. I know crying makes people uncomfortable. I've also learned this past year that sometimes it's okay to cry. Sometimes we really shouldn't stop it. It's our body's way of expressing something. So I have really great friends and crew, and I just show up crying everywhere. So if you need to cry tonight, you can also cry tonight, and that's okay. That being said, if I become overwhelmed and have to leave, please do not follow me. I have this whole routine I go through. It's all good. I talked to my therapist about it. So please don't follow. As I was preparing for this speech, I was speaking with my therapist yesterday, and I've been really struggling with how to do this. I don't know how to introduce my son to you guys and tell you about his story and make you love him and see the tragedy that it is and bring it back around to hope all in 10 minutes. That's a huge assignment. And truthfully, many days I don't feel the hope. So we will come back around to it, but you're going to have to hang in with me as we get there. I've been going to a lot of wellness conferences lately, and I get very frustrated because it feels like we talk about everything at surface level, and I am not at the surface level. I am like, I don't know if it's way low or if it's way high, but I can't talk anymore about this just at the surface level. But in writing this speech, I learned there are things that I can only talk about if I have them written down. And so I was struggling because I want to be authentic and bring to you guys realness, because that's what you deserve. That's what we're here talking about. And I can't do that if we stay at the surface level. So some of these parts of this speech are going to be scrapped, and it's going to be messy, and it's going to be complicated, and I am going to show up anyway, just as all of you showed up in your own messy uncomplicatedness as well. So thank you for working with me through that part too. So all of those disclaimers being said, let's meet Vincent. This video that should start is a bunch of pictures of him as I was building this, trying to only pick a couple for you guys. I was having constant meltdowns about which pictures were the most perfect. So one of my chiefs made this something to look at. Don't pay attention to it if you don't want to. Vincent was born January 18th, 2008, to an 18-year-old mother. He was silent when he came out of the womb, and I thought for sure something was wrong. And then he started talking, and good Lord, he did not stop talking for years and years. He was happy. He was chatty. He was a snuggle. He was a snuggler every single night. That was one of his favorite things. He would come up and he'd ask for snuggles. And when it was bedtime, by God, it was 2 stories and at least 1 song, and Amazing Grace was his favorite song, and we had to sing all 3 verses. And if you don't know that there's 3 verses, they're all good. He loved people, and he loved people from day one, and he was a protector. We moved to Ames when I graduated high school, and I want to pause for a minute and say, when I became pregnant at 17 in a Catholic high school, a school system I'd been in since preschool, I was informed I was not allowed to talk about my pregnancy. I was not allowed to talk about Vincent, none of it. And in general, while they were trying to be very protective, what ended up happening that year was 4 other girls became pregnant, and 3 of them had abortions, and 1 of them miscarried from drug use. So when we talk about how we cannot talk about things, it has a lot of unintended consequences. And I bring that up for that, and to remind us that how we as systems and we as communities address things systematically makes a difference. Graduated high school, came to Iowa State. Vincent was my study buddy. He was my adventure buddy. So I studied kinesiology and health, and a lot of kids learn head, shoulders, knees, and toes. Vincent was learning, all of the facial bones in the skull and where his soleus was, and we made songs about it. And he got very into stars, because he got into Greek things, and we would go to the planetarium all of the time. He was smart, and he was attentive, but he wasn't like Mensa smart. But he was pretty smart. He got the nickname from his kindergarten teacher, Mr. Precise, because everything had to be said exactly right and justly. And justice was a very big, important part of Vincent's life. So that we moved to Ames. I eventually became employed with the Ames Fire Department, made enough money I could move us to a nicer part of town. And when we did that, we knew we would have to move schools because of open enrollment laws. And I knew that that was not going to be good for Vincent. He never transitioned well, even when he was a baby. So we tried to fight it, but in the end, rules are rules, and we had to transition. And it was this transition that we started to see Vincent went from a very popular, happy, well-adjusted child to a bit of an outsider. He began becoming very bullied. And a lot of it had to do with his weight. So a lot of kids, they grow out and then they grow up. Vincent was the same way. He was born 99th percentile in everything, and he was constantly head and shoulders above all of the kids around him. And when he changed schools, these kids that didn't know him, didn't appreciate the parts of him he was willing to bring, they turned to bullying. And this was in second grade. So this was young. We were seeing people being bullied. There were fights on the playground over it in second grade. We begin to see it. But you think every kid goes through these stages. Every kid gets bullied, unfortunately. And we think it's kind of normal. And then we thought it was pretty normal. We were doing everything we could to work through it. We weren't super worried, but it was always in the back of our minds. In fourth grade, Vincent approached me with his father and said that he wanted to go live with his father for a year. His father was in the Navy, the ROTC program here at Iowa State. He had graduated and he'd moved to Virginia, and Vincent wanted to go there for a year. I had a lot of reservations about it, but at the end of the day, when your son wants to go and learn who his father is and develop that relationship, how do you say no? So eventually I said yes. It took about a year, and a lot of very uncomfortable conversations. But I said yes, and he went to Virginia and spent the year with his father. And I want to be very clear here. I am not blaming his father for any of the things we saw. I'm just reporting what we saw. Vincent spent the fifth grade in Virginia at his father's house, and our schedules were now reversed, where his father had been the happy, fun vacation parent. I was now the happy, fun vacation parent. And it was really pretty nice, I got to tell you. When all you're doing is being on vacation, that's really nice. But not only were the schedules reversed, the discipline was changed as well. I used to be a rather granola crunchy person, I've been accused of. So our household was kind of the same way. Take that for what it was. We had very healthy food. We had rules, but mostly the rules centered around love and respect. And you were expected to uphold those. But if things came up, we would have a conversation about it. His father is a naval officer who married a naval officer. So between the two of them, it was a very militaristic household. And I'm certainly not saying that that's a bad thing. What I am saying is that was a very large dichotomy for Vincent in fourth grade to have to transition between. And it was a big struggle for him, and understandably so. Vincent, again, was never one who transitioned easily, and this transition was no different. There were lots of unintended consequences that really changed who he was and how he centered. Vincent made it through that year, gained a baby sister that he poured all of his love and protectiveness into, and picked up some new sports. He returned home to me with a month to spare before starting sixth grade. And after a year apart, it felt so good to be reunited. But I could tell that he was a different kid. He was jumpy and eager to please in anxious ways. He was very apologetic. I could tell that walls had started to be put up. This was in seventh grade, started in sixth into seventh. He was still my little snuggler who occasionally, when he came home from school, asked to meet in the papasan chair and have a story read. But he'd begun pulling away. I wanted him to start therapy to help with the transitions and the big feelings from the past year, the big feelings with his father deploying in a couple years. And as a single mom, I knew that he needed someone other than a single mom to go to, and I thought a therapist would be a very good resource. His father went to the same Catholic school that I did, and his parents had sent him to a Catholic therapist associated with the church, and it didn't go well. It made his father's mental health worse. So when I approached his father saying, I think Vincent should see a therapist, his father said no. He said, I do not want to happen to my son what happened to me. And I can understand that. I could understand that. And at this point, we had concerns, but you have to mitigate when you co-parent, right? What is worse? Is it worse to send your child to the therapist and have him have to live with the shame of that when he's with his father? Or is it worse to not send him to the therapist and try to work through all of those big things as you are at home? And I don't have the answers for that. I've seen it done both ways. It works and it doesn't work both ways. I knew that we needed resources, but I didn't want to cause V any more stress. Eventually, I decided things were worrisome enough that V needed a little bit of help. So we found him a therapist that he saw a couple times, and things were going well. By now, Vincent had started school and he was excelling at football. Vincent was my little snuggler. He was a gentle giant. He was very many things and none of them aggressive. And when I watched my son go out on that football field and he was like all out tackling all the other people, I was like, who are you? But he loved it. He loved it. And he had one coach in particular that saw him and saw the things that he was going through and encouraged him and talked him through some of those bigger things. This man is actually on the foundation's board today because of what he has seen in V and because I have watched him do the same for child after child that he has coached. Wrestling started and Vincent had no background in wrestling either, but it was the same story. He became known as all will, no skill. And he really kind of clinged to that one. We were working on the skill side, but I'm telling you what, you did not outwork that child on the court. He was really far behind in learning the skills, but he had a natural athletic talent and was loving it. In 6th grade, Vincent struggled mostly with body dysmorphia. And I should mention that he came home to me from his father's very thin. Some people gave him the nickname Skinny Vinny. So it was almost like we were back to where he was beforehand, but instead of being bullied for being larger, he was now being bullied in a roundabout way for being too thin. We just made a complete circle. Vincent was constantly watching what he ate, reading nutrition labels. These are good things, right? These are things that we teach our children. We want them to learn about nutrition. We want them to know what they're putting in their body. They're good until they were taken too far, and Vincent took them too far. He was skipping meals. We were suspicious of purging. We all ate dinner together because dinner time was very important to me for his whole life. I thought if we get no other together time, we are getting dinner. But he would often excuse himself halfway through. The toilet was just on the other side of the wall. And though we could never hear him purging, and we asked him often bluntly about it, he adamantly denied. I made sure all of his coaches were aware, and we kind of left it at that. It just becomes something we were aware of and protective of, but it was kind of our new normal. Vincent had some walls up at this point, but by all appearances was adjusting to our life and role and story well. He was making friends. He was working through what we have all deemed just normal body and anxiety issues, especially for a teen who'd entered puberty a little bit early. 7th grade started, and Vincent had begun wearing hoodies and long sleeves all of the time. He was even more ashamed of his body, and he was trying to hide. And then at dinner one night, his sleeve came up just a little bit. And we saw burn marks. And it wasn't 1. It wasn't 2. It was 13. And my world stopped. We spent that whole night trying to figure out how to address this. Because here's the thing about self-harm. The behavior breaks your heart and it scares you to death as a parent, and it is concerning for sure. But it is not V burning himself that I was scared of. It was whatever was inside of him that was causing him to burn himself. When we talk about self-harm, there's often 2 reasons people do it. First reason, they're numb and they want to feel something. Second reason, they feel too much and they need to direct that. For Vincent, it was often the first one. He'd become numb. He'd been through so many things, so many changes, and he didn't know how to handle them. And so he disassociated. And when you do that for too long and you don't know how to come back from that, you go numb. Some people say that self-harm is a cry for attention. And to that, I would say, okay, but if someone is harming themselves to get your attention, should we not be paying attention? Should we not be getting them help? Vincent was terrified I'd tell his father. Again, here as a parent, you have to make a lot of tough decisions very quickly and amidst a lot of chaos and tears and anger and fear. So we made a game plan. I don't know if it was right or not, but it was something V and I could stomach that we hoped would keep him safe. I told him he was going to start seeing a new therapist that specialized in youth. We would begin self-harm checks. I was going to talk to his coaches because they were very good. We call them fences for him. They helped him stay within a safe place. We were going to have safety plans. It was October and he wouldn't be seeing his father until Christmas break. And I told V I couldn't send him to his father's house over Christmas break without telling his father because I needed to know that he could be safe and supportive if the feelings to self-harm arose while he was away. Vincent said he understood. We worked really hard on addressing these things. And though they did not stop overnight, the self-harm did begin to feel contained. It felt like we were making steps forward, getting healthier. And then sometime that fall, I couldn't tell you exactly when, but I could tell you it was on a really nice day. My friend and I were taking her dog for a walk, and Vincent was at school. And I received a phone call from the principal. Vincent had been found with tobacco at school. I was hurt, and I was angry, and I knew he might have stopped showing self-harm on his skin, but he had just changed it to another less visible form, and our agreement had unintendedly taught him how to hide even better what was going on inside. A mile and a half, like walk, jog, cry, sob, back to my house was one of the longest I've ever had. And on the way to the school, I called his dad and let his dad know. His father and I always tried very hard to co-parent. Are there any co-parents in here? Okay, maybe just a couple. Co-parenting, it's a thing. It's a challenge. And we did the best that we could to present a united front at all times. And this was no different. We got to the school. I got to the school. His father was on speakerphone. Principal showed me the pipe and the cigarettes they had found in Vincent's bag. And then they told me Vincent had been selling these things to other children. And I felt like the hits just kept coming. Hurting yourself is certainly not okay. Hurting other children by selling them things that were bad for them was against everything we thought that we had taught him. Vincent was unwilling to say who or where he got these things from and why he was doing what he was doing. We found out he was vaping as well. We also found out Vincent had been spending lunch periods in the bathroom alone, so he would not have to be around the food he was tempted to eat. And my heart broke for him all over again. My child sitting alone every day in the bathroom during lunch period. It wasn't for a couple months. We found out all of his friends knew. They just didn't tell anyone because they thought that was the supportive thing to do. We got all of that sorted out, and then the principal said, "There's something more we need to tell you. Vincent, do you want to tell her or do you want me to?" And Vincent couldn't speak. He was sobbing. So his principal looked at me and told me that Vincent had tried committing suicide once already and was struggling with thoughts of it every single day in 7th grade. Many months later, we found out that his first attempt was actually in 5th grade, his year away. 5th grade. I am telling you, this man, the principal who had only known us for 1 year, who had been one of Vincent's football coaches, who was sobbing with us as he told us for the very first time of Vincent's struggles, and the guidance counselor who was there protecting and advocating for Vincent and with Vincent the entire time, made all of the difference in this. This community that we had just moved to, that we had not done anything to serve, we had not given back in any way. This community treated us like family, like one of their own. And when Vincent had just been caught doing some really bad stuff, he was selling tobacco to other children, they found a way to discipline him that said to him, "We love you and we care for you, and we have expectations that we know that you can meet. And we love you too much to not hold you to them. We're not going to kick you out. We're not going to treat you in a way that makes you put up another wall. We care and we are here to help in the good and in the bad." That day was one of those days your life changes. There was no longer a debate about getting Vincent professional help. Whether or not his dad had agreed, my child at the age of 11 had tried taking his own life. And even though I knew he was struggling, we thought it was normal, that he was going through normal things, and we had no idea how bad it was. Fast forward a couple months, Vincent's in school. By the way, he's like getting straight A's. He's excelling at everything. Every norm that we have for him to try to excel at, he is excelling at. He is spending time with friends. He's attending talk therapy as well as substance abuse therapy. And I've heard from people, why would he go to substance abuse therapy for vaping? Vincent wanted to. He hated that he relied on vaping to numb or feel better, much in the way he hated relying on self-harm to numb or feel better. And he actually really enjoyed talking with his substance abuse therapist. Of all of the helpers he had, that was the one he related to the most and was most open with. Little by little, Vincent was opening up about the things he was going through. Self-harm checks had been clear for a while. We'd been exploring new hobbies. Vincent was taking to him. He still hadn't given up his source, but he assured us that things were done. He spent Christmas at his dad's that year like usual. And let me tell you, the logistics of flying a kid who needs meds but can't be trusted with meds and all of those things, it's no easy task. He came home with a normal adjustment period, but he appeared stable. We celebrated his 13th birthday, took him out to a parking lot, and I let him drive the car a little in preparation for his 14th birthday. He liked to drift. I was like, you got to stop. We had sushi, one of his favorites, for dinner. And then we started to notice him coughing. Now, this was all during COVID, so we were alarmed and cautious, but not immediately suspicious, right? It's January in Iowa, people cough. And then V got caught at school with vape materials again. And it all came out. Long story short, the kid who had originally told Vincent to sell for him at school had been threatening Vincent if he didn't start doing it again. He told Vincent all sorts of awful things like, "I'm going to kill your dog. I'm going to kill your mom. I'm going to kill all of these people, and I'm going to do it in front of you, so you have to watch. And then I'm going to kill you." We had evidence this child had tried entering our home. We got the police involved. Unfortunately, there wasn't anything anyone could do. And in the meantime, Vincent ended up hospitalized. This is another one of those days I'll never forget because I am so ashamed of it. Vincent came home from school and I knew something was not right. I also knew he was more likely to talk if we were doing tasks together. So I asked him to help me change the smoke detector batteries. I don't know if you've noticed, I'm kind of short. Vincent was very proud to be 5'9". And if you're a teenage boy, you can do the math on inches to figure out for yourself why that was. We got through one battery change and Vincent told me he needed to talk to me. He told me I couldn't keep him safe. He told me he couldn't keep himself safe and he needed to go to the ER. And we talked about this so many times. I had always told him the ER was a place he could go if he needed help being safe. We had laid the groundwork. We had talked about this. But when the time came, when Vincent told me he needed help, I was scared. I thought he meant safe from this other child who had tried breaking into our house, who was threatening him. And time after time, Vincent told me, "No, you don't understand. Nobody can keep me safe. I can't keep myself safe. Eventually, we loaded up in the car and we headed to Ames. And halfway to Ames, Vincent changed his mind. He said he just wanted to go to swimming practice, that a workout would help him feel better. And that he now saw that I was right, that we could keep him safe. And he acknowledged all the safety measures we'd put in place. And he thought that they were working. And my heart was breaking. My child had told me he was thinking of killing himself. And 15 minutes later, he was sobbing because he did not want me to take him to the ER. He was begging me, do not take me to the ER. I'm better. I will be better. I don't need to go. It was a bad moment. And I wanted so badly to believe him, to turn that car around. But I couldn't. I told him no. I told him we were going to the ER and we would see what the doctor said and we would go from there. And then Vincent tried throwing himself out of the car as we were going 55 miles an hour down Highway 69 on the way to the ER. He had just told me he was okay. When we got to the ER, it was decided we needed hospitalization, obviously, but there were no beds. And it was likely going to be a couple days before one opened. The next morning, the news was the same. There were no beds. Eventually, we got a call that a bed was opening up in Council Bluffs, and off we went. Thankfully, I have family in Omaha that let me stay while he was there. After 5 days, our insurance allowed time was up, and the doctor discharged Vincent. We had new safety plans. We had new medications. The doctor assured me that this was just a tough time in his life, that he was going through puberty. He had all of these things with the other kid, that he foresaw Vincent being completely off of meds and doing better in 4 months, provided we kept him in 2 activities and one of them had to be physical. And I wanted to look at that doctor and say, we are already doing that. Give me something better. We went home. And we did everything we could to suicide-proof Vincent's life, much as how you baby-proof when your child is young. In my work as a first responder, I have seen many suicides. In fact, a suicide was one of my very first calls, so I am very well aware of the many ways a person can end their life or harm themselves. And after Vincent's hospital stay, we made sure to remove as many of those items from his life as we could. It became a balance, safety versus feeling like a prison. We could not have a completely safe home without it feeling like a prison. And no one gets better feeling like they're living in a prison in their own home. I don't think we walk this balance well at times, but we really tried. Unfortunately, it was at the hospital where Vincent learned once again, adults don't always have the answers and many can be tricked. If he told them what they wanted to hear, they would stop listening. And he could continue hiding. And hiding is so much more comfortable. Life for Vincent had become a battle, and for us, his battle had become our life. There was no more unsupervised bus time where he could get access to people and objects he shouldn't have. He had talk therapy once or twice a week, substance abuse group therapy once a week, his psychiatrist once a week. He missed out on school or sports and he had to make up work. We developed and we followed all these new safety plans. We checked in, we scheduled extra family fun time. We did literally everything the doctors were telling us to do and then some. And the school was right there with us. He was having check-ins with his guidance counselor. The school had their own plans. They reached out many times to help him feel loved and valued. And he did there. They also had a system called P3 where anyone could anonymously post a tip. And it's this system that saved Vincent's life a few different times. I'm not exaggerating. There was one night I was at work. It was 11:30 at night and Vincent Googled how to hang himself. The guidance counselor got the notification, immediately called me, and we were able to get to him before he harmed himself. During this time, there were some friends, both of mine and of Vincent's, that pulled away. And I get it. People felt unsafe and uncomfortable and were doing everything they could to protect their own children. I can't blame them, but I would be remiss to pretend that during some of those most difficult months, it wasn't frustrating to feel people turning their backs on us. We finished the school year, and Vincent went to spend a month at his father's like he always did. He came home and the transition was tough. Self-harm, mood swings. But like anyone who has raised a teen knows, mood swings are kind of just a thing that they do. So we were trying to feel out what was normal versus what was a symptom of Vincent's mental illness. We also had joy and thankfulness and love and laughter and excitement on an upcoming football season. Vincent had a new girlfriend that he had missed, and he was super excited to spend some extra time with. On August 13th, I reported for shift as normal. I woke up around 3 a.m. I was just thinking, there's no reason. We ran an alarm at 4. And after we got back from that alarm, there's this bench outside of Station 2, and a coworker and I sat on it and just talked about life, about our plans for the weekend, about anything for a couple of hours. It was the perfect morning. Sunrise was beautiful. I went home, I took a shower, and I got ready. We were going to go to the Des Moines Farmers Market and then to a taco festival because I wanted the farmers market and Vincent wanted the taco festival. So that was our compromise. I went to wake Vincent up. It was pretty rare that he slept in. He'd struggled with sleep for many years. So whenever he was sleeping, I tried to let him sleep for as long as we could. And I noticed the light was still on in his room. And I stood at his door and I took a deep breath. Then I opened the door. And I found him. And people always ask, did you know? Was he anxious? Was something coming up? Were there signs? We knew Vincent was a teenager with a mental illness that never seemed to stabilize for long enough to find him relief. We knew he had seen his therapist that afternoon. We knew he had been moody, but no more so than normal. We knew he was making plans for his future. We knew he was as stable as he got. So no, we did not know. And when you talk to so many other parents who have lost their children to suicide, there are not as many signs as we like to think. Signs we can be on the lookout for. Signs we can help control. And these are very good and righteous things that give us a sense of control. But at the end of the day, someone who wants to hide can be very good at it. And if there was ever a child who had the support and the love and the resources to overcome their mental illness, it was my Vincent. And yet, 6 months after his hospitalization, where a doctor looked me in my face and told me he'd be fine and off medication in 4, my child had died by suicide. Vincent was quite literally my everything. Every decision, from the town we lived in, to the food we ate, to the TV shows we watched. He liked the stupidest TV shows, to the activities we did, to the job that I took that allowed me to be a stay-at-home mom. 20 days out of the month was done through the filter of, will this help build the future for Vincent that he deserves? One of love and one of purpose. That's why I'm here today, bearing my heart to total strangers and a couple of my bosses. Because if I can lose my Vincent, so can you. And that's scary, and it's unacceptable. We need, as a community, to come together and solve the issues facing our youth so that they stop turning to suicide as their answer. Tonight, you will hear about many entities trying to make a difference. I started the Red Shirt Foundation in honor of Vincent. Our mission is to get more resources to our children. As V went through his battle, I was blessed with a baseline knowledge of what was out there for resources, but I have learned about so many more since his passing. And every day I'm like, how did I not know this was there? We need to get these resources in the hands of the parents and the kids and the teachers that need them. I had a baseline knowledge of what he was going through, and yet it wasn't until I took Julie's class on mental health first aid that I learned what psychosis was, and I learned why so many of the times we went into the ER because Vincent was in a psychosis, why they didn't hospitalize him, and they let us go home with a child who was not safe. I also had a great support system I could lean on when I was brave enough to. Many are not that lucky. Something I keep coming back to is that the Bible tells us love always prevails. It protects, it always trusts, it always hopes. And one of our themes tonight is hope. In Vincent's case, and in the case of 14 other youth in Story County alone last year, and in so many of the ISU youth already this year, and of the student that we lost, whose funeral was today, love did not prevail. Love was not enough. It is not on love and hope alone that we can rest. We must take action. And it starts with us here tonight, how we talk to and about each other, how we approach difficult and uncomfortable things. Love and hope, these things are verbs. You've all taken a very great step just by showing up tonight, and we thank you for that. Please don't let it end here. Thank you.
Excuse me. My name is Julie Saxton. I am the mental health advocate with the Ames Police Department. I have been in this role for almost 8 years now. And Sarah said something very important, that we really do need to come together as a community. We need to really learn how to see one another, to let others know that we see them, we hear you, we're here to support you. And it doesn't mean that we have to have the solutions or I think you need to do this, right? It's about listening. It's about listening non-judgmentally and holding space for people. It's so incredibly important. 1 in 4 people will be diagnosed with a mental illness sometime in their lifetime. 1 in 4 people. And when you look around this room tonight, I wonder how many people are suffering in silence. And all it really takes is one person to say, how are you doing? No, how are you really doing? I want to hear what you have to say. I'm in this with you. Since I've been in this position for almost 8 years, my first year, there were about 850 mental health calls for service that I worked on. And last year, there were 2,300. I responded to around 1,500 of those. What I will say is that for the first 6 years or so, 10% of my calls for service that I responded to were suicidal in nature. Those attempting suicide, individuals that were contemplating suicide. As we dealt with COVID, last year, 20% of my calls for service were individuals that were struggling with suicide. And I can tell you that today, I talked with two people today that were thinking about suicide. Somebody today that I had to look in their eyes and ask them, are you thinking about killing yourself? It is incredibly important that we talk about this, that we bring this really uncomfortable topic to light. We need to get comfortable with the uncomfortable because there are many people suffering. And I can tell you, as I continue to work and collaborate with the Ames Community School District, our students are suffering. They are suffering silently. They are struggling to know who they are. The bullying, it's incredibly heartbreaking, the number of parents that I talk to, their stories about their kids. This has to stop. We have to make it okay to talk about hard things. And I encourage parents, loved ones, There's so many great education resources out there. We've got to learn how to figure out to talk about these things because you really can save a life. So thank you all for being here this evening.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kinsey Hauser,
I am April Rank.
and we are the mental health advocates at the Iowa State University Police Department.
So a few things about the mental health program, mental health advocate program that Julie talked about. We're really fortunate to have a mental health advocate for the Ames Police Department and have two of us that work on campus. So a little bit about what we do. We are available to provide support and resources to students, staff, and faculty who may be dealing with a mental health challenge. We also can assist officers on welfare checks. And so that's a big bulk of what we do is checking in on someone who has maybe been struggling with a mental health challenge and a parent or a friend or an advisor or an RA is concerned about them. So we take that responsibility very seriously, and we make sure that we're checking in on those students when we get those calls. We also serve as a liaison between the ISU Police Department and other mental health resources in the community so that we can bring back what the community is doing to our department, but then also to the students and faculty and staff that we work with.
We also provide a lot of education and outreach on mental health. We do things such as freshman orientation. We have tables where we hand out candy and bring the therapy dogs, just getting our faces out there and making sure that people know that we are a resource on campus. We do mental health first aid, which we'll talk about in just a little, and then also QPR training for students, staff, and faculty on campus, along with another group of facilitators who helps out. QPR stands for Question, Persuade, and Refer, and it is a great suicide prevention training that we have to offer. Like I mentioned, we have therapy dogs. I apologize, they're not here tonight, but they are pretty great as well. They are a really good tool to get people to come into our office just to talk about how they're doing. Half the time, people just sit on the floor and pet the dog, and that's a really great way for people to just open up a conversation and for us to talk about the resources and support that is available to them.
And it's really important, talking about the therapy dogs, it's really important that we make our students and faculty feel comfortable talking about this really uncomfortable conversation. As Julie said, we need to get comfortable talking about the uncomfortable. And so that's really what we do. And that's the message that we want to spread on campus, because we know that mental health issues and substance use issues among college students is a concern. We see that weekly. I mean, there's really not a week that goes by that we don't see that. Students have a difficult time sometimes adjusting to this new world, this new way of life, new friends. Maybe they're living away from school from home for the first time, navigating new relationships, and then ultimately dealing with the challenges of being a college student, which can be difficult. So that is really our purpose, is to be a resource on campus for our students, faculty, to just kind of talk about some things that are not comfortable to talk about. And so we really make sure that we get out there a lot with the dogs, and all of the times that we can kind of interact with students, we will do that so that when they are struggling, they remember our faces and they remember, oh, that's the person with the dogs that we can go talk to. So that's really important to us, to make sure that we're there when we're needed.
We did want to provide some statistics on our welfare checks as well, just like Julie did. I can say there has been an increase every single year since 2015. In 2020, and just a reminder also for these, 2020, we had COVID, so a lot of our students weren't there for a lot of the year. But there were 302 welfare checks that year. The year after, in 2021, we had 342. And then just this year to date, January to today, we've had 226. I assume that number will be higher than last year because we haven't hit October yet, or November and December. As you can imagine, there's a lot that goes on at ISU, especially midterms and finals. And so we definitely see a big spike in our welfare checks and people who are in distress around those times. Also, we do want to mention that the busiest day of the week for us is typically Thursdays. And like I said, October is usually really busy, February as well, and March because of midterms. And then also those times around finals as well. So that is something that we try to do, is really getting out and about, being involved in different events on campus, just so that people can see that we are resources that are available to them. Thank you.
Hello, I am Susan. I am a social worker, inpatient behavioral health unit at Mary Greeley Medical Center. I have been with Mary Greeley almost 8 years. I have been working in the mental health field almost 28 years here in the Story County community, doing a wide variety of different things, including residential care, did some work in corrections, some job coaching and that kind of thing. But again, I have been at Mary Greeley. I'm doing inpatient social work for it's been about 7.5 years. So I'm not real great at technology, so I'm glad to see that this is cooperating. So got just some facts regarding mental health, which you can see, I think is really noteworthy. 473,000 adults have a mental health concern, and that's in Iowa. Approximately 1 in 5 adults are diagnosed with mental health. I know Julie said 1 in 4, and that's probably more correct than probably the 1 in 5. You can see half of US adults will experience some sort of a mental health challenge within their lifetime. 1 in 5 children have serious mental illness. So as you look through these slides, you can see that we have a serious mental health crisis happening. So I did throw in a little bit about substance use also. I will tell you that on the inpatient unit, so we have, and I'll get to this, we've got 3 social service staff. We have 2 licensed social workers. Actually, I apologize, we have 4. So we have 2 licensed social workers, myself and another social worker. We have a licensed mental health therapist, and we also have a substance use counselor. So when we look to best address patient need, we look at what's bringing someone into the hospital. Lots of times we have persons that have dual diagnosis with mental health challenge and substance use. And one person can't take all of them. So, there could be days that maybe out of maybe 16 patients, 10 of them also have a substance use disorder too. So I thought that was important to share that information with you guys also this evening. Just a little bit about the process. I spent a lot of my time talking through the process with families and providing education, not just to patients also, but to their families. So behavioral health admissions start at our emergency department, medical floors. We get a lot of transfers from other hospitals, not just in Iowa, but surrounding states too. And that's just due to bed availability. And I'll have a slide at the very end that kind of shows you how the beds are mapped out in Iowa. So when someone comes to the ED, we get a lot of phone calls from community members and from family. I'm really scared. This is what my son or daughter, this is what my spouse is displaying. What do we do? We advise people, if they can, to take that individual to the nearest emergency department. Obviously, if it's emergency, call 911. But we encourage people a lot of people want to come straight to Mary Greeley, and we really encourage them to go to the closest hospital and to get that evaluation done because it's safest for everyone. And then if it's determined that they need a bed, then there's someone that makes those phone calls for beds in Iowa. And Sarah had mentioned Council Bluffs. And again, we'll get to that in terms of bed availability. So once the assessment is done, assessments presented, and a psychiatric provider determines whether or not an individual meets criteria for an admission. when we get patients from outside hospitals, we get lots of records, and then our crisis nurse looks over those. And then people are transferred to our behavioral health unit. So, and these are pretty old facts, but we see about 800 adults per year. This was before COVID. So I feel like these numbers are probably a lot higher than that. This was the most current information I could find. Average lengths of stay is anywhere from 3 to 5 days. And sometimes that can be really surprising to family members. You have someone that comes in, they meet criteria for admission. What do you mean that you're letting my loved one go within this 3 to 5 day time period? Part of what I do is to provide a lot of education to patients and to their families. Sometimes I spend equal or more amounts of time with patient family. I am a firm believer that education is so important, not just for our patients, but for their families. Really looking at this in the holistic view. When people come to us, we have so many individuals that are not just feeling suicidal or homicidal. They don't have anywhere to call home. They don't know where their next meal is coming from. They don't know who's going to pay for their medications. All things that play into someone's mental health and how they're feeling about themselves and about their lives. So each individual we're a little bit different than some of the other units. Everyone's assigned to work with a social worker. So largely what we do is help patients to plan for discharge. And discharge usually looks like finding a medication provider, looks like finding a therapist, both which can be a really big challenge. Just given given outpatient services, wait list, that kind of thing. We have lots of wonderful providers. We just don't have enough. Lots of people really working hard to address people's needs. There's just not enough of them here. Inpatient unit has 18 beds. We take persons 18 and up. So we do have a fair amount of high school students that are age 18 that we do treat on our unit. Again, we no longer have an adolescent unit. When someone comes into the emergency department for evaluation, it's done in the same way. And then staff must find a placement outside of Mary Greeley for that individual. And again, you'll see the map as to where those beds are at. One of the things I did talk to our crisis nurses, they're the ones that go downstairs. And I said, I want you guys to tell me, since you see everyone, what are some of the biggest challenges that you have when you're downstairs assessing youth? So one of the nurses shared, many of the adolescents are seen for behavior related issues, which then makes it hard to find a bed. Lots of times we hear they don't meet criteria from other hospitals, so that can make it tricky. Sometimes it's also a challenge downstairs in the ED. We have behavioral health space. Many times it goes over into other beds, is to keep the adolescents and the adults separated. And I really asked them, I said, how can you guys give me numbers of how many adolescents you're seeing? And they said, it just really kind of comes and goes. Some weeks they're downstairs a lot. Some weeks it can be, 2, 3, 4 days, and they don't get any phone calls that we have adolescents downstairs. I wasn't able to necessarily get any numbers. So inpatient beds in Iowa, you can really see that there's not a ton. So your blue areas are going to be where our beds are at. So again, we can have people transferred, or we transfer people out to somewhere that can be like 3.5 hours away. Now, how scary is that? You're already come in for an evaluation. You've been deemed that you meet criteria for an inpatient hospitalization, and then you're going to Council Bluffs. You're going to Waterloo. You're going to wherever somewhere has a bed. And that in itself can be really traumatic for people too. There's opportunities not to visit, then people don't have family support. So it's just a lot of trickle down that happens. And the last, I just talked to one of our nurses and I just got some adolescent resources. I asked them, I said, so tell me kind of what the process is that you walk through. What do you guys do when you have an adolescent who is in the ED? So you can see, Phil was nice enough to share this with me. This is a list that they use. Some are hospitals, some are outpatient services, especially if someone doesn't meet criteria for admission, then we like to make sure that we are saying to individuals, youth, their parents and adults, these are the resources that are out there for you. At this time, you don't meet criteria for admission, but let's give you some information. Let's get you set up, get you pointed in the right direction.
Hi, I'm Sherry Flugred, and I'm just listening. And I am kind of here under two hats. One that I'll start with is I, like Sarah, am a grieving mom. My son took his life November of last year. He would have been a junior at Gilbert. He, unlike Vincent, did not give us any signs. Zero. He was a nerd. And he loved to be called that. He could do calculus in his head. He had a small group of friends, some of which you'll meet tonight. He was active in band and music and loved his brothers. And he had a father who's a police officer, a stepfather who's a paramedic, and a mom is an ER doc. So we're trained. We're reporters. We look for it. We see it every single day. And he gave us none. We had an amazing day together. I went to work to cover a shift. And when I came home, he had shot himself with zero warning. And we still don't know why. We have some ideas, gone through his phones and his emails, and we know he was bullied, but we don't have an answer to why. So my point in saying all this is you may never get the signs from your child, your spouse, your friends. They may not tell you. And so not everyone is a classic example of battling depression and anxiety and stressors for years or some major life event that has caused them this. So always listen, ask. And I have a close friend who's another ER doc in Des Moines, and he is now having conversations with his 6 and 9-year-olds about self-harm and suicide that we never thought as parents we would have those discussions. He took care of a hanging 9-year-old this last week. So it happens younger and younger. These kids see it. It's on social media. It's in movies. It's everywhere. And it's in front of them. So my plea to you as a grieving mom is have those conversations, talk about it. If you don't talk about it, they can't tell. And I wish we would have more. We had a death the year before at Gilbert, and we mentioned it to Nolan. We talked about it, and he's like, oh, I'd never do that. I don't have any of those thoughts. And we let it go, and we never readdressed it. And clearly he was having those thoughts. Although it could have been a very impulse decision that he made that night. Clearly you don't have zero thoughts of self-harm and then one day do it. So that's my grieving mom story that I got through without meeting Sarah's toilet paper. I'm good. Now I'm going to put on my ER doc hat. I've been at Mary Greeley for 17 years. Our numbers are increasing. I know, to give you some, just today I pulled, so 2020 was an anomaly, as we know, on everything, and numbers were low because the ER was like desolate for many months. Nobody wanted to leave. We were like, all the COVID, going to catch it if you go to the ER. So nobody came. And then 2021 happened. And the big things we've seen is the impact that the pandemic had on our adolescents. We took kids who saw other kids every single day. They were mixed in, and then we put them in a home with a computer and a cell phone and wanted them to learn. And we isolated them, and it became much easier to hide behind your social media, your texting, your Instagram, your Facebook, your Snapchat, whatever social media they were on. And we saw the effects of that following the pandemic when things opened back up and kids all of a sudden had to come back to school. And they're like, that's the jerk who was bullying me 2 months ago on Snapchat. And now I'm back in a classroom with them. And so we saw a lot of those effects. And just this last year, so 2021, when you take in depression, anxiety, overdose, ingestion, self-harm, we're looking at just under 2,000 patients. We're a 33,000 volume ER. So that is it doesn't sound like when you say only 2,000 out of 33, but we're dealing with strokes and traumas and acute appendicitis and, all the coughs and colds and COVID. So that's a big portion of our patient population that is there for mental health. And I was walking with my daughter the other day and saying, how do you explain to us, the non-medical group, of what an ER is like when you come in for a mental health crisis? And as we were walking and talking, I said, I kind of want to explain it as diabetes. We all know what diabetes is. Your sugar's out of control. We all know that if you go to the ER once for your high blood sugar, you don't not have diabetes when you leave. We may fix your crisis of your illness or your high blood sugar and treat you with medicine, but you still have diabetes when you go home. Whether you're admitted to the hospital for 3 days, a week, or an ER visit, you still have that illness when you leave. Mental health is the same thing. An ER visit or one counseling visit or one therapy visit doesn't cure your illness. So it's a lot of work. Mental health is a lot of work on the family part, on the patient part, on the social workers, on everyone involved, just like diabetes is, and you need your physician, you need your diabetes educator, and you yourself have to want to take care of yourself. And so when we come to the ED, as she said, you come in, you get screened, and we work through your crisis. Does your crisis say you need further inpatient treatment? And then we find the appropriate bed, whether it's an adolescent bed or an adult bed, or have we stabilized your immediate crisis? And now we need the ongoing resources that you need. We need you to get a therapist, and you have to go. Getting a therapist and not going doesn't fix you. You have to take your medications. So a lot of family involvement, significant other involvement to make these people successful in their diagnoses. And so that's the big thing, is coming to the ER doesn't fix you. We can stabilize you. We can give you resources, but I'm not going to cure your depression today if you come see me tomorrow night when I'm working. I'll make sure you're not going to harm yourself that night. And then if you're better by 3 hours later and we've got you stabilized and you have a safety plan, you don't need to be in the hospital. You need continued treatment. And so I think that's the big push to parents out there. And then my last plea, that after I've met with some of our superintendents in the area, is never use the ER as a threat. I have some parents who have come in and they say, if you don't behave or you keep doing this, we're going to go to the ER. And I don't know if you remember, I'm old enough in here, not all of you are, about how when we used to say, don't make cops a threat, that you want to teach your kids that cops are your friends and they're going to come help you. It's the same way of the ER. Don't make us, we are not a therapeutic healing environment. It's chaos. If anybody has been in an ER lately, we're overrun. There's no beds anywhere. You're in the hall, the waiting room, standing room only, and that is nationwide. It's not where you go to get therapeutic healing environment. You go to make sure you're going to be there the next day. So never make that a threat to your child or your family member. We're going to take you to the ER as a consequence. It's, if you need the ER, that's what we're there for, but we should never be a threat.
Hello, my name is Ryan Keller. I'm a senior therapist with YSS. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I work out of our Marshalltown location. What I'm going to share with you tonight is a little bit more about my specific caseload and some of the individuals that I've worked with. We all have given statistics tonight, and numbers are needed and important, but they sometimes don't reflect everything that needs to be heard. Couple of things to define real quick. I'm going to use the term SI, which stands for suicidal ideations, or basically any thoughts about wanting to end your life. The other term I'll be using is SA, suicide attempts. So it is somebody who has attempted a suicide. In my caseload, current caseload of 76, those reporting to have SI or suicidal thoughts are 17, which is 22% of my caseload. These are numbers as of 9/22 of this year. In that, 22%, 35% of them are adults, 41% are adolescents, 24% are ages 4 to 11, which is kind of a frightening number if you think about that. And then there's different types of SI. There is those who have attempted a suicide in the past. 41% of my clients in that 22% have. 18% currently know how they would choose to end their life. They may not be actively trying to end their life, but they know if those thoughts get too big, what they would do. And then 41% have what we would call intense suicidal ideations. Still within that 22%, 70% of my caseload, remember I'm in Marshalltown, so statistics and demographics are a little different, but 70% are Caucasian, 18% would be Hispanic, and 12% would be of other race or ethnicity. And then just as a side note, it's not in the pie chart, but 18% of them would identify within the LGBTQ plus community. So let's talk about some clients. I want to introduce you to Trudy. Trudy was admitted into the ER and had a hospitalization because she attempted to end her life in two ways. One was by cutting herself. And when that didn't work, she tried to literally bite a vein out of her arm. She had one previous attempt of hanging herself before this hospitalization. Trudy's struggle was a negative self-belief that she had no value, and it was related to a sexual trauma she experienced as a young child by a family member. She at times still struggles with guilt for not knowing what happened to her was wrong. She didn't understand that what was going on was bad. And she found out later that her sister was also going through the same things, and she carries that guilt for the fact that she didn't know how to stop it. She was diagnosed with anxiety, depression, and PTSD. She was also struggling with feelings when she came to me about the fact that she's never known her father. He's never been in her life. And there was this constant negative belief with everything going on with the trauma that she's experienced, that she still has no value because even her father didn't want to know who she was. What was successful for Trudy was being able to change that negative belief into a positive, that I do have value just the way I am. That was her words, not something that we and the therapeutic community kind of drummed up, but she came up with that terminology. And that's important in the process because, as you'll find with many individuals, they're looking for the help outside of themselves. They're trying to fill themselves up with things outside of themselves, when the issue is they're really wanting to change what they're feeling or dealing with inside. Trudy, by the way, these names are not the real names of the clients. I wouldn't do that. But Trudy, when she came to me for therapy, she did kind of a hybrid model with me where we did EMDR, which is eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing, which is why it's important to understand what the negative belief was and what she replaced that with in terms of positive belief. But she also used equine therapy, which is important for her because she was able to feel a connection with something in a very real way. And, just a remarkable individual, but it was a struggle for Trudy. Suicide doesn't affect just youth. We know that, right? It affects all ages. So I'd like to introduce you to Diana. Diana, after she became my client, after she came in for her assessment, about a year into treatment, called me from her car on the boat ramp at the river, ready to drive in the river. That's not an easy thing for me because that was my first real situation of trying to help somebody who was actively in a suicidal plan. And what was even harder is I had to break some of the rules. And what I mean by that is one of the rules is you never leave the client alone. But when I finally got her to commit to letting me call her son, I only had one phone and I wasn't anywhere near. So I had to take the risk of getting off the phone, calling her son. Her son went to where she was. They called me back to assure that everything was okay. But, Diana didn't have to call. She could have been the silent, unheard voice, but she called because she knew that she felt empty and she needed to be filled up. That was a reoccurring theme for Diana. We would often use the analogy of recycling. When we take a bottle, a pop can or a pop bottle, we recycle it. It's not necessarily that we're going to refill it with the same liquid that was originally in it, but we can have a purpose. We can have value through that. Diana was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and depression, and it stemmed from trauma related to her parents not wanting her when she was a kid, but using her to fight each other over a bad divorce. Through EMDR, she remembers at 4 years of age, sitting in a courtroom, her parents badgering each other back and forth, arguing over her. And that was kind of her touchstone moment that really came to light. Her success was found in the fact that she had to learn to set her own boundaries. She didn't feel respected, didn't feel wanted. So why should anybody respect her if she didn't feel that way about herself? By setting boundaries, she taught herself how to respect herself, but also how others can show her respect and that she was worthy of respect. She also participated in EMDR. Next is Garrett. Garrett is a 16-year-old. He presented to the hospital for a suicide attempt and hospitalization. Garrett tried to overdose on Benadryl. He was seeing and hearing dark, shadowy figures encouraging him to kill himself. And this stemmed from the fact that Garrett was, before his hospitalization, dealing with substance use and selling drugs. And his best friend and he were doing this adventure together. And his best friend decided to go do a drug sale that Garrett was supposed to do. His best friend got killed in the process. Garrett carried a lot of guilt over the fact that he should have been the one that died, not his best friend. I hope what we're seeing through some of these is that it's not all the same. Suicide doesn't necessarily present. There's not, an A plus B equals C method for understanding it. It's about paying attention and listening. Of course, Garrett was diagnosed with substance abuse disorder, depression, and anxiety. He had to learn to replace negative self-beliefs with positive, honest self-beliefs. We don't want you to replace a negative belief with a positive belief that doesn't make sense. It has to be honest. Honesty, by the way, is a big part of helping to get through suicide and suicidal ideations. He participated in several types of therapy, from CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectic behavioral therapy, but ultimately equine therapy was what really connected with him, while at the same time he was going to another therapist for substance abuse. And then my final individual for tonight is Sheila. Sheila is like what I've heard from others tonight. She came to me with low self-esteem, had already started doing self-harm, had thoughts of suicide. But Sheila had everything. She was the best athlete at her school. She was very popular. Sheila, very pretty girl that had a lot of people giving her attention. She was active in just about everything that you could be active in. From the outside looking in, Sheila had a perfect life. But what was happening on the inside and in her own privacy was she was cutting when she was feeling anxious, and she was having very debilitating anxiety before games and events. She was struggling with not living up to the expectations that she felt were being placed on her for being as good as she was. And the gossip mill at school didn't help. She could feel alone in a crowd and felt she had no value without having a significant other in her life. Success came for her through finding her own voice, being able to be assertive, not disrespectful, but assertive with her parents about what she wanted for her future, and not feeling like she was always letting them down with their expectations, and setting her own goals. And she participated in cognitive behavioral therapy and dialectic behavioral therapy. I've got a few cases too where, because of my current role, I have a team and I that get to work at times with law enforcement, and suicide isn't just about the individual, unfortunately. there's families affected by it. Sitting with a family whose father maybe just shot himself while they were sleeping in their beds is a reality of what many have to deal with. And a lot of the same steps have to go into how you interact with those individuals in that moment as you would with trying to work with somebody who's having those intense suicidal ideations. We've seen a man who was trying to jump into traffic because he was about to lose his home and gravely in debt. A gal named Lauren who had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, was seeing a lot of things, but had some very unspeakable trauma in her life, abuse in her life. And her goal was to make those who hurt her to suffer, and then to have suicide by cop. Our police officers can face things very intense with that as well. She was just stuck in a trauma cycle. And then some homelessness situations. A gentleman named Larry, who, if it wasn't for his biker friends and a bench in front of a bar, wouldn't have had a place to sleep and felt very hopeless, but was able to connect and, be able to not only work on the homelessness issue, but also to work with himself in terms of health issues and other things and have a more positive outlook. Or Mary, who didn't want to leave where she was sleeping because she didn't want to have to give up her cats. And it was a better idea to end her life than to give up her cats and to work through those things. So there's a lot of things we can run into and see. But then the question I ask, if I was in your shoes, is what can I do if I'm faced with this? And we've already heard this tonight, but the first step is to normalize the conversation. I remember being a new therapist, and it scared me to ask people if they were having thoughts of suicide, because I had this belief I'm going to push them to it. When in most cases, the exact opposite is what happens. By showing them it's okay to talk about it and to work through it, people feel the ability to be empowered and to move forward. One thing I've also found is that I promise to be honest with them, and I expect honesty in return. If we do a safety plan, a lot of a safety plan is about someone's word. And I've been told many times by clients over the years that when they hear me say something like, as far as I know, you've never lied to me, and I don't believe you're going to. So if you tell me that you're going to follow this safety plan for the next week until we meet again, I'm going to believe you. And they've told me that gave them some strength to go through it. It seems a small thing to me, but it comes down to honesty. It also means in that honesty, we have to establish appropriate boundaries. And one of those boundaries means that we have to let them know when we have to share information with other people. You can do the same if you're in that situation, that you're going to be there for them, but at some point you are going to have to get other people involved for help, and that's okay. And don't be afraid to be direct. I think I heard it earlier from one of the speakers from Mary Greeley, but the question, are you thinking about killing yourself, is preferable over, you're not thinking about killing yourself, are you? The direct is better than the indirect, because the indirect comes with a sense of guilt or a sense of, what's wrong with you. It's more important to be an active listener when you're sitting with somebody than it is to try and be a problem solver. There'll be time to solve the problem, but that time may never come if we don't take the opportunity to really sit and listen. We also have to remember that it's not the time to argue. Just because the person who is dealing with suicidal ideations problem doesn't seem significant to you, doesn't make it insignificant to them. We don't have to determine whether or not it lives up to our values or if it's a big enough deal. We can sit and listen to them and be present and to accept them at the point where they're at. And most of the time, when it's in that moment, logic isn't important either. What is more important is being heard. is an assurance that you're there. Remember, I told you I broke one of the rules. Don't leave the person alone. It's important to sit with them and to let them know what's going on. And then I would encourage you to know some of your resources. In this area, we have mobile crisis. We have, of course, 911 that we can call. There's the new 988 text option. One thing I didn't know about that until recently is that you have to have data on your phone to be able to use that. It's not just like 911 where you can call anytime. And then there's even things like the suicide, the veteran suicide line. If at any time I could be any help, here's my contact information. Thank you.
All right, so my name is Adelaide Searles, and I am a senior at Gilbert High School. We as people have fought for our minds. As a whole, we have gotten better at accepting and helping mental illnesses. The stigma towards mental health has been immature, making a joke out of a serious issue. Throughout history, mankind has not taken one's mental state seriously, not until recent years, where people have spoken up and out about it. I have had my personal struggle with my mental health. At first, I always thought something was off about me, the way I thought or acted, the way my brain worked and figured things out just seemed different than other people. I just didn't know what it was. Not until recently did I truly understand my issues. I was diagnosed by therapists with anxiety, depression, and ADHD. I had known about my depression for a while. For years, the thought of getting out of my warm bed made my body stiff. The constant urge to disappear completely, getting inside of my head and ruining everything for myself felt constant. Doing activities and normal stuff like eating just felt like a burden and a chore. I lived like this for years until I found an escape. It was the night of November 8th at 11:30 when I last had a plan. I stood crying in the shower as the thought of death entered my head. Suddenly, I felt at peace. I knew that this could stop that little nagging feeling in my gut, that constant badgering in my head. This was my escape. I gathered my thoughts and almost went through the motions, but as I reached the final step, I had come to the realization I just could not go through with it. No matter how many times I had tried in the past, I could never muster up the courage to finish it. I later found out this was the biggest blessing that God would ever give me, a second chance. The next day when I had gone to school, I learned that it hadn't been me that night. It had been a classmate. November 8th, 2021, my classmate and former friend, Nolan Poole, had ended his life at midnight. As the morning announcement of the news came, my heart dropped. Everything went silent. The shock that ran through everyone's body was known. As the words set in, I broke down at the start of my class. The whole day and next week was quiet. It felt like a ghost town. No one spoke or felt the same. I spent my days in the library coloring with some new faces, trying to forget, or at the time, a stranger's house, Ben Melody, who will speak next, who would become my best friend. The way I opened up about my personal struggles was at his house. Even being around people I didn't know, but it was a safe place. Everyone was dealing with the same thing. Having people to support and look after me made all the difference. What really made a change, though, was that they could see that I wasn't doing well physically. I had got into cutting and using self-harm as a coping mechanism for years. They could see my struggle on my skin. Even though I fought for years to hide it, that exposure helped put me out there so that my friends knew I was struggling and that they could help me. And they did help more than they thought. I currently hold a 6-month streak self-harm free. I only got there because of the people who were there to support me. But to get there, I had to force myself to be vulnerable and understand that I wasn't alone, and that was the hardest part. The memorial and funeral services were even harder to go through. I knew nothing would be the same after that, but I did not know that it could get better. Through this experience of suffering and pain, I came to meet some of my best friends, two of which I started to change with, a group that would help the community and culture of our school. The two people who had been by my side through the wretched month of November and who will stay by my side for a while. The three of us, and the help of many others, started a mental health group called Moving Forward. This group is dedicated to helping the community of our school. For those who don't have people to sit with at lunch and who don't have any plans on the weekends, we host an event once a month to help the kids of our school come together as one. Our group hosts movie nights, park days, barbecue cookouts, and other get-togethers for the school, but we are very stern about our purpose. We are for the students, by the students, separate from the school, but we work for the kids in the community. We understand that teachers do all that they can with mental health days, but personally, it never helped. I'm sure a lot of other kids will agree as well. The best thing that you can do if you're struggling is reach out. No matter what you may think, I promise each and every one of you has at least one close friend or family member for you to turn to. I know that's what got me out of a really bad situation. We put ourselves and our school to the test, coming together as one body and helping each other. No one deserves to sit alone at lunch or have no one to talk to. Everyone deserves a chance to create memories and have a fun high school experience. That's what we strive to do, to help the kids like Nolan who didn't have any close friends and who felt like an outcast, for those who struggle silently.
My name is Ben Melody. Sorry, I am a senior at Gilbert High School, and these are my buddies who have helped me create Moving Forward. A little bit about Moving Forward, just overall, we are a student-led mental health group for the school, but not through the school at all. We are completely separate from the school because we think that that the students will best know that they are loved and cared for if they know that there's not an adult or a teacher or anybody who's telling us to do these things. I love all the clubs and everything that is through the school. I think they do a phenomenal job, but for the students to know that they are cared for as much as possible, we need to be on our own so that they could just know that this was truly straight from us. Our main goal is to create an environment where all students know that they are loved, have a good group of friends, and have a place to go every once in a while where they can feel comfortable in their own skin. We have events at least once a month for the entire high school, and we're now working on creating a new plan where in the winter months especially, we will have 2 months or 2 events per month for seasonal depression. At the beginning of Moving Forward, we had 2 suicides in 14 months at Gilbert. After the first one, everyone just kind of went back to how they were. Everybody thought that, oh, this is not, it's not going to happen again. It's not like it's just an irregular thing. But after Nolan, all the juniors got together in my basement and we said, hey, we actually this has to come from us. This has to be students for the students, the teachers, parents, school, everybody's doing everything that they can. But right now this is a culture thing and we need to do this on our own. We thought that this really needed to exist because there really wasn't anything like this from the student body. And after Moving Forward was created, it just feels a lot lighter in the school, just like a weight has been lifted off. And it's weird to feel that just walking through the hallways, but you really can feel it. This took us quite a bit to get rolling because we had meetings over and over and over in my basement and with a select group of people who really were passionate about this and really wanted to help. In our first few events, we only had a few people and people were very cliquey, but through a lot of our events, we've gotten more and more people, and we had an assembly for the whole school and our numbers have grown. And Dennis is going to talk about where we are now.
Hello, my name is Dennis May. I'm a junior at Gilbert High School, as well as a member of Moving Forward. Throughout our existence, we've had bonfires, barbecues, pool parties over the summer, and games in the park. We've moved on from that, and we've been able to, as Mr. Melody said, hold an assembly for the entire school in which we were really able to get our name out and address the student body. Most recently, we held a movie night at our school, and we were able to see 170 students attend, which was so very beautiful for us to see how our group had developed. At our events, something we're proud to see is how everyone has a good time and feels welcome. What we've been able to see is how friend groups intermingle, and we've created opportunities for new relationships between the students so that none of our students has to feel like they're struggling alone. As a whole community, I've noticed how we've become closer, how our hallways seem warmer, and how I'm able to say hello to everyone I see without feeling like I'm being unusually friendly or weird. Some questions that we're often asked are, what's the role of the students, the teachers, and the parents in moving forward? And so, as has been said more than once now, the organization itself is run exclusively by the students and for the students. However, ideas may be taken from the rest of the community because we want to ensure that it is understood that we are students for students. One way that we can get our message out is through our t-shirts and our t-shirt order. We've just had one launched recently, and this is a great way for us to spread our message so that we can help as many people as possible and get our word out. This order here is open for a limited time. In addition to bringing the community together as one, we've also had, as one member of the press stated, made mental health cool to talk about, which is something we didn't think was possible. And it's just incredible to see how that has changed our community and our school. In the future, we intend to host events at least once a month, and especially focusing during the winter months to combat seasonal depression, which faces many of our friends and our fellow students. Our goal is to keep our dream alive. We don't want to be a one-generation thing. We want to keep the impact going, and we want to make sure that in the future, we're able to make sure no student feels alone. So what can you take from this? You can share our story. You can talk about us. You can contact us on our social media. You can email us with ideas, more opportunities to help the community. And if you have any questions, please, please, please ask us. Finally, please take some time out of your day to talk to somebody new and to make an impact. Thank you.
Well, if you aren't inspired, you really have a hard heart. I'll tell you. Thank you. And I have told Adelaide before we are in the same house church, I have used their story with other mayors around the state, and they are in awe of what they're doing. And I had a conversation with someone here in Ames today about it. And they said, you know what Ames needs? We need moving forward, essentially, in the community in general, the model. And I just think you're just to be commended, and it's inspiring. And for those who may not be aware, Nolan is Dr. Flugrad's son. So thank you for letting them share this story, which I'm sure is extremely painful to you.
I've always wondered, thank you all for hosting this tonight. Thank you all for contributing. Thank you guys for setting an example for everybody over 18 and under 18 of what our society really should be normally. We should be caring for each other, talking to each other, talking to our neighbors. But we can go around the room and I bet half of us don't know our neighbors. And how many of them are sitting at home thinking these very thoughts that we're sitting here talking about? And I think there's an active role all of us can do besides sitting around and talking about, mental health. I mean, we all have a little mental health, I think. But I'm just wondering from everyone what you think our contribution of, or the source or the problem, whatever, of our crazy cell phones. I mean, you walk around town, everybody's on their phone. You walk down the sidewalk, everybody's on their phone. Half the people tonight in here were on their phones. And we're not talking to each other, just even in schools. I mean, there's no reason kids need cell phones in schools. And I've often wondered, why do they need cell phones in schools? Why do we need our cell phones if we're in a meeting or if we're in conferences? All these sorts of things when we're supposed to be actively listening to each other. And I didn't know your thoughts on that after talking to many people, youth and older people, about causes and reasons and that sort of thing.
Thank you for bringing that up because social media is great, but it can also be really detrimental, right? I definitely can say from my lens anyway, that, a lot of our youth really struggle hiding behind their phones. It's pretty easy to say whatever you want to say behind a screen. I mean, would you really be saying that to someone's face? I hope not. But it's pretty easy to hide behind that screen. You can access anything, right, on the internet. And again, I'm not here to say whether or not we should have phones in school, but I want to say this, especially our younger kids, right? And it's great that they have technology, but we're really asking kids kids are going to struggle with impulse, right? They're just impulsive. Don't click on that. Well, when you say don't click on that, they're going to click on it, right? I mean, so I think we have to think about that, right? Not every home has rules. Not every home has parents that are there monitoring, right? I mean, it just is what it is. And it isn't just the bad kids. I hear that too. Oh, the bad kids are clicking on whatever. No, it's all kids, right? And they're curious and it's normal, but it can be really detrimental. I think you just have to have conversations. It goes back to having conversations about suicide. We have to talk to our kids and talk to each other about, the dangers. This is what can happen. Trying to be the model of engaging with one another instead of your cell phone. So parents have to model those things too, right? And I love what you said about knowing your neighbors. When we teach, there's 4 of us here tonight that teach mental health first aid. That's one of the things that we talk about is we're in a mental health crisis. Susan Moore said that from Mary Greeley Medical Center. And the only way that we can get out of this crisis truly is to know our neighbors. That's where it starts. Introducing ourselves and not hiding behind our cell phones and staying inside. We have to be getting out there, talking to one another. And Adelaide, I think you said being vulnerable. Absolutely. We all need to be vulnerable. When we're vulnerable, great conversation can come from that. And it's that face to face. And I think that's so incredibly important.
Well, I just want to summarize a couple of things that I heard, what we can do. And I've heard, and several indicated this, but it just pains me to hear that bullying is a repeated theme. And one of our conversations is going to be about civility and conversation, and that includes social media. So I would just challenge all of us to think about what we're going to say before we say it or post it or whatever. I really think that we heard several cases tonight where that might have been the trigger that actually ended a person's life. And how would you feel if you knew that happened? And when I was asking Aaron about community, one of her coworkers talked about at Iowa State, what they're doing is building a back. They said this is mental health will not be successful. You're not going to be successful in helping people without having community. And we're hearing that. I think you saw that moving forward. You hear it in other conversations, but whether it's a faith community or it's a neighborhood or it's a club or a group, we are social beings. We need that community. And the other thing was that this person I was talking to today, I hadn't heard this before, but I think it's right. It's empathy. I've heard a recent story about an individual went out on a call. A mayor went out with a policeman because they had a very irate individual. I know it's hard to believe. It doesn't happen in names, but I went to talk to this individual, and the mayor said, I just was asking questions, and this guy just was ripping into him, and he just was very calm, and they just tried to get it resolved. And when he left, the policeman said, I'm really glad you were very calm, because that man's son is dying of cancer, and he's acting out in a way that he is just not able to handle it. And this is how he's manifesting. And he said 3 months later, he saw in the paper that his son had died from cancer. So we got to think about what people are going through. Maybe we don't realize that. And I'll be the first to admit, there's times I just don't realize that someone's really got something under, behind them. Maybe they have issues, health issues. Anyway, with that said, we're going to end 3 minutes early, but please stay around and make some new friends, practice what you talked about. And I want to just thank everyone who presented. Sarah, are you still here, or do you have to go on? Yeah, there you go. Thank you very much for being so vulnerable. I hope it was helpful for you to share, as it was helpful for us to hear your story. And we grieve with you, and also Dr. Pfluger, we grieve with you too. But we thank you for the openness and honesty. I hope this has been helpful, and please join us on the 3rd of November at the water treatment plants. Everyone know what that's at? It's on 13th Street. You can park there on the east side. Nice big parking lot, nice community room out there. Same time, 6:30. And I think a lot of the same people that are here tonight will be also present. And those that didn't get a chance to share, hopefully they can make it also, and they'll probably go ahead and pick up where we left off. And this has also been taped, and it will be available on the City of Ames website. So if you want to either rewatch it or refer someone else to it to listen to it, it'd be helpful also. So with that, have a great evening. Thank you for coming.